Welcome to Women Emerging, Reclaiming Our Souls from Sexual Abuse. I'm your host, Misa Hopkins, and I'm thrilled today to introduce you to Layla Martin. She is the founder of the Tantric Institute of Integrated Sexuality, and she has spent over 10,000 hours teaching people how to reclaim their sexuality and experience unconditional self-love and epic amounts of pleasure. After studying sexuality and human biology at Stanford University and Tantra in Asia for almost 10 years, Layla now combines modern science with the effective practices of Tantra to inspire millions of people around the world to heal trauma or shame and fully awaken their sexuality. You can experience her on her YouTube channel or through her books, programs, and public speaking. And Layla, I am so excited to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, tell me why it's important to you to be talking to survivors of sexual abuse today.
Well, I am a survivor of sexual abuse. So my biological father was sexually abusive until the age of 7. And I, like most of us, was also a magical, curious, also spiritually inclined person. And when I went to engage in spiritual practices, I basically found that because my body was such a space of hell for as long as I could remember, and sexuality was such a complicated, distraught, painful place for the first 7 years of being sexually active, I couldn't be sexual with a partner unless I was high or drunk, or it was such an uncomfortable, horrible experience. And so when I first started engaging in spirituality, it was such an escape for me because it was so blissful, and suddenly it was possible to feel pleasure. But I often felt pleasure in kind of disembodied states. And also, I worked with a lot of meditation teachers who, to me now it's very clear as a trauma survivor that I was just evidencing trauma symptoms, pain that would be very common for a trauma survivor. During meditation, I was having flashbacks, I was in horrible body pain. It was just really uncomfortable to be with myself. And many meditation teachers told me, just keep meditating. That's basically the way through. So I just did 10-day meditation retreat after 10-day meditation retreat. I was very, very hardcore and very dedicated. And it really countered, I think, my ability to grow, and wasn't coming from a self-compassionate place. So one of the things that I learned being so committed to the, people opening the doorway of what sexuality can really be for them, and understanding that it can be a portal to spiritual states of consciousness, and being really passionate about spirituality and sexuality, just period, for everybody, because I think it's just part of what makes life magical and beautiful, and there's so much in it. I really discovered as a trauma survivor, one, that there wasn't a lot of great guidance around spirituality and spiritual practices for those of us who had experienced trauma. And I realized that, that first phase of finding pleasure and ecstasy and happiness anywhere is an important first step, whether it's in your body or not, but that there's another then sort of period of the journey where it is possible to come home into your body. And I didn't ever think that it was going to be possible for me to be happy in my bones, It's maybe in some altered state of magic, but in my in this limited, in unsafe, crazy, icky, dirty realm of my humanity, no way. And it wasn't, I would say that the number one thing I wanted as a sexual abuse survivor that I have, that I could articulate is, I want to feel like I got my life back. I want to feel like I can be happy on my own terms. I want to live this human experience. And that didn't really feel real to me until I also did the journey back through my body, which was more challenging, but ultimately the thing that I most longed for and made me ultimately feel whole and healed again.
Yeah, I'm really hearing that the exalted states you were experiencing were embodied states within you is a different experience than simply being outside of the body having that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you brought it home, as you say, which is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
So you may have answered this, but I want to make sure I ask it so that we're all clear together with you. Why do you think that pleasure is necessary on a path to healing?
Well, one of the things that I found, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, is once I found that I could start to heal some of my pain, it was like all I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it like as much as possible. But I didn't realize that I was overwhelming my nervous system, number one. And number two, it was like, especially my vagus nerve, like it couldn't take it. Like I was basically like going into my wounding over and over again and being like, I'm going to heal. But then feeling really heavy and low energy and very hard to function for like days and days afterwards. So thinking I was doing all this really powerful healing work, but then actually kind of pulling the bottom out of my nervous system. And when I really realized why I was doing that, it's so natural as someone who's experienced abuse to sort of subtly perpetrate your own nervous system. Like you think you're healing, but actually it's like I'm going to do this to you, rather than being in deep collaboration and deep compassion and deep love for the nervous system. So one of the things, there's actually two things I learned to do with pleasure. The first is that if I did do healing, or I did go into pain, or I did have some sort of flashback, to very quickly restore my nervous system to pleasure. And pleasure could be something simple like smelling an essential oil or running my hands through my hair, something non-triggering, but that gave my body a feeling of delight. And that actually helped my nervous system learn that like, oh, we don't have to get so stuck in it. Like we don't have to go into the wounding and just like keep cycling over and over again into the wounding. So that it was doing that, but it was also then psychologically learning to feel like I deserved that I didn't just deserve to go into the wounding, to feel really miserable over and over again, but that it was okay to give myself pleasure, that it was okay to actually restore my body to goodness. And then the second reason as well with pleasure is that's A, usually where a lot of the wounding has taken place, and B, usually where a lot of survivors feel really unsafe. But that often means if we feel unsafe to experience pleasure, or only safe to experience pleasure in these very narrow realms, that sometimes we don't have a very robust neural network of pleasure activity. And so the more that you focus on pleasure that feels good, and the more you're willing to say yes to pleasure, even in very safe, very gentle ways, the more your nervous system is like, oh, pleasure is a state that's actually safe. Pleasure is a state I deserve. And then when you go for more sensual, like pleasure just with yourself, I found that the more that you build that as a pathway over time, the more that then when you want to be with a partner, let's say, or even just up the ante in your own practice, it's like you've actually laid the foundation there to start to experience more and more pleasure. And it's the restoration of pleasure and the restoration of joy and the restoration of like high energy states, I feel, that really is the restoration of wholeness. So it's so important to focus on pleasure as a really key aspect of healing and not just getting rid of pain.
Indeed. And it sets up that motivation and desire to keep experiencing more pleasure, correct?
Yes.
And keep moving in that direction, because it's a pleasurable playground here on earth, right? That we can fully enjoy if we choose to.
Yes.
Beautiful. So you also believe that spirituality can be supportive in the healing process, but, and I love this awareness that you have, spirituality doesn't mean spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
So would you talk about that, please?
Yeah. So One of the things that's really helped me understand this is that, we have many different parts of our nervous system. And even when, in the vagus nerve, we've got this whole upper system and this whole lower system. So what can happen is in our cortex, the thinking, judging part of the brain, we can be like, I just want to be positive all the time. Or like, I'm just going to choose health and positivity and gratitude. Now, that can be useful insofar as creating new pathways, like we were just talking about, of kind of restoring a sense of choice to one's life. But it actually creates a brittleness in the nervous system to say, like, I can only be profoundly connected or even have like a sense of joy and acceptance if things are good. Like I have to hold on to a sense of positivity. And so a lot of the kind of modern spiritual movement can dovetail with that by being like, oh, if you're good at yoga, then you'll be happy and grateful all the time. And if you're good at meditation, then you'll be at peace all the time. But actually these, my understanding and my experience of kind of the deeper meditation paths of having worked with Tantra for so long and having had just my own deep spiritual practice is it really is this ability to be with everything. And that's the real healing power, is the ability to show up for whatever is inside of our body. And so sometimes I think we mistake healing for always feeling great or always needing to feel positive, and we cross that with spirituality. Like if I'm a really spiritual person, then I'll always feel X kinds of ways, instead of really understanding that it's taking a deep breath and being with the part of me that's feeling really bitchy right now, or really ungrateful, or really like horrible, or really like whatever it is. So there's that whole aspect of not spiritually bypassing, but also there's usually whole networks of us that got developed during trauma or after trauma that are often very, very deep in our system. And so if all we do is try and go for like positivity or gratitude or things like that, and not do that deeper work inside of ourselves, I find that like I don't feel whole if I'm spiritually bypassing, if I'm ignoring the part of me that feels contracted, if I'm ignoring the part of me that still feels like it's living in trauma. I don't have to give that all of my attention all the time, but to be real with those pieces is not to bypass, basically, and not to think that I'm only spiritual if I'm happy and peaceful and grateful all the time, because then none of us survivors would be spiritual at all. So there's that piece. However, I have found for those of us who are spiritually inclined, feeling connection to higher powers can be so healing, but it's also complicated. I found one of my deepest pains was being like, if there is a powerful goddess, then where the F was she? There's a lot of existential pain sometimes that can come up. There's a lot of real questions. So I love spirituality being a support if and when it's real. If you let yourself ask those real questions, you let yourself have that real experience. It doesn't just have to be like, oh yes, okay, the goddess is looking after me all the time. It's like, it's okay to be like, and where were you when I was 4, and to really engage in this aliveness. And beyond the mind, beyond those questions, I have found that there are these deep conscious energies that hold and protect and support and guide in ways that, our minds can't always understand. And I did actually have my it's not like the healing work is ever done, but after about 10 years of working on my own trauma, I still felt like when I got present with myself, I felt tired and heavy and sad. Like I was like, that's still the dominant feeling inside my body, 10 years, of focusing on this. And even that some of you are like, I've been feeling that way for 20, 30 years, right? There's no shame in it at all. But I was like, wow. And so I really made the intention. I was like, look, I feel I will always have that memory in my nervous system of trauma. The experience that happened to this body in this lifetime is never going to go away. But what I really wanted was that wasn't the dominant experience in my life moment to moment. And so I made that intention really strongly. And it was actually one of my primary Tantra teachers, Ma Ananda Sarita. She's amazing if you want to check her out. And she also was a sexual abuse survivor. And she actually guided me through a past life journey. And I don't know if past lives exist the way people think they do. All that mattered was that when I really did this deep past life journey and healed not just this lifetime of trauma, but like previous lifetimes of trauma, that's what actually released the final piece in my body that was like dragging on me moment to moment. And so I've just really experienced that, you know, if those things feel real and available to you, or they're pathways that you enjoy, they can be so profoundly healing in ways that like our mind can't fully comprehend, or like modern science can't fully comprehend yet, but they can be so powerful for creating a level of release and integration that sometimes isn't available when you just stay on like just on what is so far understood by science.
I think that's really true. I think the power that I heard is that willingness to be present to the body and let it take you into the unknown realms that you've not yet known or experienced, where the real wisdom starts coming in.
Yeah.
And that creates a whole new relationship with you and the divine as you know the divine, and a whole new relationship with your body and your soul through time and space. And you've opened to that and allowed that to come through by being present to what is there rather than trying to dismiss what is there. Am I understanding correctly?
Absolutely. And like, I just am a big fan of asking questions and waiting for the answer. Like you're saying, like sometimes I found that people are looking for like a very specific, like this is the exact thing that you're supposed to do. But I found in the really big pieces, it's like ask the question with the intention to find your way through, and then wait. And sometimes it comes right away. Sometimes it takes a couple of months, but that deep inner wisdom is within us, and it responds. It responds to questions. It responds to thoughtful inquiries. You know, it's not just supposed to be like, oh, I opened up to it. It should be solved. It's this ongoing willingness to navigate. And sometimes as survivors, it's really hard to trust that inner wisdom, but such an important part of the path to regain that.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. And I'm wondering if you've discovered that the bigger the question, right, the more that we open up to the potential, or an open-ended question, the more information we get. Sometimes we frame our questions so narrowly, it isn't giving consciousness any opportunity to get in there and show you how it works.
Totally.
Yeah. So an expansive question is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You also have said that healing your heart and your ability to be in a romantic relationship can sometimes be harder than healing your sexuality. And that intrigues me. Would you speak to that, please?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found in my own personal journey, I've seen it mirrored in a lot of people I've worked with, is like, I started like my word for it was kind of like, oh, I can now, like once I'd done a certain amount of healing on my trauma, I was like, oh, I can see how my conditioning because of the trauma kind of like messed up these areas of my life. So like, let me go and like clean up this area of my life. So like one of the first things I had to clean up was like my own self-hatred. Like it was like disordered eating, like just disgust with my body, like a sense that I was like so ugly, I didn't deserve to exist. And I was like, you know what? That's going to be fun. That's number one. I'm going to clean that up first. Right. And so like that took a couple of years of focus and attention, things like that. And then I don't remember the exact order, but they kind of came in these different waves. It was like, okay, now I've always been too scared to make money and build a career off of my true voice. Like I've always been kind of like avoiding my power. And I feel like I can see my trauma conditioning showing up in that. So I'm going to go like clean up that area of my life. And then like, okay, my sexuality, like I'm going to be able to have sex with someone sober. Like that feels like a great next goal, you know? So then it was like this sort of like cleaning up all these domains. And over the years and years, I was like, oh wow, like I've come so far, you know? And sometimes we miss how far we've really come because we're always focusing on what we haven't done. It was like all this stuff I hadn't done, but I was like, wow, look at that. Like, I'm not disgusted by my own body. Woohoo! So there was like, there was this process, and after doing so much work, after being in leadership around this, guiding others and all that, I was like, wow, all those other areas, I was able to stop going into trauma cycles in really unconscious ways. I was able to stop freezing and running and attacking myself or others. Like, I was able to see myself and to heal enough of the traumatized patterns and conditioning. I was able to kind of restore my life to something that felt like it was mine. And that was like a systematic process. But my own romantic relationship, and I mean, this has really been in the last like 2 years, I was like, whoa, like you, Layla, are still like, have not cleaned up this part of your life. Like, your romantic partnership with, you know, I'm in a partnership with a man, still feels in the way that you respond to intimacy, and not sexual intimacy, but love intimacy, the way that you respond to dedication and just a moment to moment, like somatic experience of being with a male partner, when it was my biological father who was the source of the sexual trauma, was like, it was really humbling to be like, wow, I can do this much work and there's still this part of my life is still really impacted by my trauma. And it felt and still feels like one of the hardest areas. I'm still making my way through, and to just really see the level of terror that I still hold in being emotionally close to a man. It gets so simple. And I really wanted to talk about it because I see often that trauma survivors that I work with dismiss the heart relationship piece. Like, I should be like they don't see that as much as being part of their trauma as they do of like, oh, you know, it's hard for me to have an orgasm, or I feel shame during sex, or I get shut down, you know, in this way if I don't feel safe. But just the like basic day-to-day being with a partner, especially, you know, I think most of us will project, you know, if we experienced abuse, especially at the hands of a caretaker, that makes relational healing one of the last frontiers I've found, to be in deep love and sexual partnership with someone, and to feel like that part of us is reclaimed. And there's different ways of hiding. I find a lot of us hide by just being nice all the time and just like sweeping stuff under the rug and never actually saying what we want, right? Being in more the fawning dimension. And so a lot of hiding can happen in that domain. I tend to be more aggressive, come from an aggressive line of women. So mine tends to be more like triggered all the time and like constantly feeling like aggravated and like my partner's doing something wrong. And it took a really long time to be like, wow, when I look under the hood of that, it's terror of just being in simple, connected love with someone who is an attachment, like who's my primary attachment. Like, and I have done all this work. I can have multi-ecstatic cosmic orgasms, and like I can, you know, have a career that's very public and use my voice. And like, it's so hard for me to just be like, you love me and I love you and it's okay. So that part I find can be, for many of us, deceptively challenging to get all the way under there and underneath the terror to the part of us that just loves, you know, and can be in loving partnership.
Yeah. I so appreciate your authenticity with that, because it is such a big part of the journey, right? I mean, ultimately, especially as we get older, it's that intimacy that you want to rely on, that you want to know is there from day in and day out as you age together and as your needs change, that you're there.
Yeah.
And there's a comfort in that. And it does get very much trampled on with incest.
Yes.
It really does. I so appreciate you speaking to that, because it's a big part of the journey.
Yeah. And it's very, I find it's one of the places where it's easier to deceive yourself. I mean, I can definitely speak for myself, because at least when I was like, oh, I'm, you know, whatever, in my early 20s and I can barely function, like, well, I'm not getting out of my own body and my own psyche. So like, I get like, guess we got to like, work here, do the work here. But with a partner, you can always be like, actually, I think it's you. Like, I don't know.
That's right.
Doesn't matter how much trauma I've been through. I think all of this that's going on right now is probably because there's something flawed in you, or like there's something flawed in the relationship, or there's something so wrong with me that I can't even express myself enough in this relationship to have like what feels like a real partnership. And so I just think it's easier to stay unconscious in romantic partnership of the actual ways that incest and sexual abuse are running the show still in hidden ways, because it's so easy to just be like, oh, actually it's you, or to be so used to having partnership feel strained and stressful or numb that like it doesn't even I know this for me, I can be like, how did I go 7 years and not like, not see that? Like I consider myself like a pretty conscious person, like I meditate and like I did 7 years, I didn't see that. Like it's so humbling. And so just really, the reason I bring it up is because I don't know that I would still be in my partnership if I hadn't really, really, really identified those pieces and like seen how much harder it was to take self-responsibility for those pieces in a really empowered way, not a everything's wrong with me kind of way and this is why everything sucks, but like a truly empowered, like, oh wow, all of that pain is still there operating under the surface. And it's the reason why I get so triggered by my partner. It's the reason why I start so many arguments. It's the reason why I have a hard time even just orienting somatically towards my partner and like staying in just a good feeling. And my friends who had really healthy, beautiful childhoods, like that piece I see just comes so much easier for them.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. And it's so lovely when you're in relationship like that and you see it, you finally see it in you and you say, okay, this is my piece. I don't know what his or her, if you're with a woman, I don't know what their piece is, but I know what mine is.
Yeah.
And I can dig into that. And it's already shifting the relationship the minute you go in. And there is this journey and flow. And I so appreciate that you brought up that it affects every area of your life.
Every area.
Sexual abuse doesn't just hit your sexuality. That's one expression, but your confidence in the world, your ability to trust your intuition, to make good decisions, to have a clear connection with divine consciousness, it's every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And that you claim it for yourself, Layla. That's what's so inspiring about your words to me is that, oh, I'm going to claim it here and here and here and here and continue to experience life on my terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every single time I got close to like claiming another piece, I'd have a dark night of the soul. And I see this with so many people, so I want to articulate it as well, where it'd be like, it will never happen. Like so many times it was like literally like right as I was getting close to like the full reclamation, it would be this thing. And I believed it every time where it was like, you're just not gonna be able to do that in this lifetime. Like you're not going to be in healthy partnership. You're not going to ever be able to love your body. You're not going to be able to experience like healthy integrated sexuality. And every time I had to almost like cross that river as I got to it. But I like to always articulate it so that when other people get to that portal, they can maybe like look around and be like, oh, even though I'm sure right now I might not ever have this thing. Like maybe the trauma was too deep. Maybe it was too long lasting in my system. And the only way I know to get through that portal really is surrender and being like, well, maybe not, but I'm going to die trying. And like, and that kind of surrender. But I just see over and over again that right before a breakthrough is this almost like sense that it will never happen for me. And then that's the point where like, it's like, no, keep going.
That's right. That's right. Right through the doubt and loving the whole experience, as you talked about, right?
Yeah.
All of the grit as well as
Yeah.
the joy on the other side.
Yeah. And the trauma path is the same as the spiritual path. We just like, I don't know, get it by some other name and some other words or whatever, but you have to go deeper into yourself than you might have otherwise ever have gone and find places inside of yourself that were just, you didn't even know it was possible to find that much power and love and all of that. And it's just a different, like, I like the word gritty. I feel like it's for the gritty souls who like want to know the truth.
Indeed. Beautifully said. So reclaiming that full sense of sexuality and that joy, what can that look like for a woman who's thinking, okay, that sounds really great that you two can talk about this, but I don't know about me. What would you tell them?
Totally. So it's definitely a process, right? So never try and go from 0 to 100 because like the nervous system just isn't capable of doing that. So I'll speak, I think it lands more if it comes from my experience. So when I first started going to coaching and healing and therapy for sexual abuse, it was because I had my first like truly long-term boyfriend that like really loved me. So I was about 21, 22 years old and was just getting so sick from being loved that like I could barely even function. And still up until that point, like hadn't really ever had sex sober. And I was like, I really want to have sex sober. And this person wants to look me in the eyes. And that seems like a good idea. So like, let me try. And I went numb, I think it was for like a year and a half as I was sort of in therapy, working with different people and working with some somatic healers and spiritual people and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, I was like, why am I so numb? And I remember thinking like, well, there must be something inside sexually that you don't want to feel. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make my next sexual experience be like, I'm going to feel what's here that I'm not wanting to feel. And I got so disgusted that I actually threw up over the side of the bed. And so I think like the first step in reclaiming sexuality is really like taking stock and being okay with like what can be there, like the strength of the feelings, the strength of the fear, the disgust, the get the F away from me. I don't know if we can speak in those terms, but that's what it felt like to me. So, it was just like, I had to be like, okay, this is actually what's here. Like no matter how much I wish that I had a different experience right now, this is what's actually here. Then it was really a phase of offering love and understanding, right? So all of those experiences are defense mechanisms. They were me trying to keep myself safe, right? Disgust is like a last resort. If you can't get something away from you, like disgust is like one of those final feelings, right? So I was like, oh, okay, my body is just trying to protect itself. There's nothing wrong with me. And I think that's the biggest thing for survivors in sexuality is when you first start opening up your sexuality much deeper, it's like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like everything you feel inside of your body is an intelligent response to what happened to you. And so learning to like trust your body, listen to your body. Then one of the things that I found is being able to be in presence with those parts. So like, I've seen this talked about a lot in general trauma healing, but not necessarily in sexuality. But this is what I experienced in sexuality and I'll kind of have words for, where it's like the cortical part of you, the part that judges and analyzes and all of that, it can't touch the traumatized part of you, even neurologically. It's only the beingness. It's the part of you that's present, right? And so sometimes you're like sitting there feeling disgust or fear or shame in sexuality. What feels really safe is to go in your head and be like, why am I feeling disgust and shame in sexuality right now? When really the key is deep breath and slowly over time, no pushing, be like presence with it. Like, okay, I feel shame right now, or okay, I feel disgust right now. Okay, I feel fear right now. And this is a long-term training and it's a warrior-esque training. It's a warrior-esque training to be able to be with those experiences without judgment. Like, okay, body, okay, you're so horrified right now by the sight of semen, like you can barely function out of my head, into my body. Okay, and like, deep compassion. So one of the things that I longed for on the spiritual path was to be in love with all of creation, right? And so it was like, well, here you go. Like trying to puke over the side of the bed. Let's put the like rubber to the road and find compassion right now for this part of existence. So that's really like a first phase, is to be able to be with those experiences and not try and override them into pleasure or into orgasm. Now, what I find is if those experiences have enough space to be felt and loved slowly, slowly, usually with support of good guidance over time, but also really learning how to support yourself through those, what happens is like there's this space underneath where there's more freedom and there's almost a place to create something new. And so you'll get tastes of that every once in a while. And then all of a sudden there'll be, our body's natural inclination is pleasure in sexual situations. Our body's natural inclination is desire or playfulness or all of that. So it's like you'll get like tastes of that start to come. And then usually, associated neural networks of like, oh, there's the shame again, or there's the fear, or there's the all of that. So then presence with that, right? And then when there's presence with that, this other pleasure will come out. And I'm a big fan of having a self-pleasure practice because that can be less threatening than being with a partner a lot of the time, and really restoring like this deep sense of trust with my body. Like, okay, you want to experience pleasure right now? Let's go for pleasure. Oh, okay, now you're experiencing fear and shame right now. Okay, we're going to be with that. And also having lots of tools like breath work to be able to breathe through it, to be able to show up for it. Also being willing to let my body work it out itself. So the body has a natural endogenous healing capacity, but it feels even weirder to do it in sexuality because we're very programmed that sexuality should be about pleasure. So it's like, if in the moment, like I'm feeling pleasure and then I feel a block in my pelvis, and so I start breathing into my pelvis and my pelvis wants to be like, ah! It seems like you're like I'm supposed to be having a great time right now, but sex is actually the full expression of life. So it can be this very like loving, very deep restoration of the body's integrity. So I find if you let your body kick, shake, growl, whatever it is, it gives the body this like restored sense of power again. And through that, slowly, slowly, you can start to add like orgasmic capacity back in through doing different orgasmic practices. You can use a jade egg or a glass dildo or different sex toys to actually release chronic tension and feelings of unsafety inside of the vaginal canal. You can work with your cervix or the space of the cervix if you don't have a physical cervix. And what can happen is oftentimes survivors, we've created long-term physiological stress and tension, which results in pain or numbness from feeling unsafe to be our sexual selves. So really the heart of all of this is to restore safety to your sexuality, which sounds so simple, and yet it's a long-term process of finding, okay, where is the parts of my body, the parts of my energy system that feel unsafe, and how do I systematically show up for them with so much love that they're able to integrate. Then I use breath work, then I use movement, then I use sound. I teach all of these tools in order to release and integrate those experiences. And then with that free energy, there's more available to experience pleasure, to experience play, to experience orgasm. So it's like kind of this systematic process. And, a lot of survivors are like, oh, that sounds like so much work. I'm like, it is. And all of us have this limiting conditioning. Like no one got a free pass on planet Earth right now. I don't know what the deal was when all of us came in, but nobody came just being like, I'm a multi-orgasmic queen who's able to feel the full power of my pussy. Like literally almost nobody feels that way, whether they experienced abuse or not. Most people have to do this work to reclaim their sexuality. Oftentimes as abusers, as people who have experienced abuse, we have a steeper uphill path and the stakes feel higher and the emotions can feel stronger. But the journey is the same. We're still headed towards reclamation. We're still headed towards liberation. We're still headed towards beautiful experiences in our body that maybe, who knows, but they're beautiful no matter what. And I like to really remind those of us who have been through abuse of that, because everybody goes through a process to reclaim themselves if they're a human being. And we just do it with different experiences, different, all of that. But the actual reclamation is the same. So even though it feels like a lot of work, it's actually possible, I believe, to end up being more empowered, more filled with pleasure, more sexual than you ever thought possible. And to take that on as such a deep mission, but to give yourself a realistic amount of time. Like, think of it in terms of years and decades and not days and weeks. Because if you think of it in terms of days and weeks, it's like, I'm failing. And you're like, no, you're not. Like, and we think sometimes, oh, that's so much. It's like, no, it takes 7 years to become a doctor, usually even more if you want to be specialized. Like, what makes us think that we can heal one of the most profound human traumas in less time than that and restore a level of sexual freedom and pleasure and liberation that most people never even touch in their lifetimes, whether they experienced abuse or not? So there's such rich possibility here at the same time.
And each step matters. I think it's one of the myths, right, that it's this multi-orgasmic state, or it's whatever we perceive that state to be. That's where it's all happening.
Yeah.
But every step is a gift.
Yeah.
And I'm loving that you're talking about personal intimacy,
yeah.
which is really where it begins, because when that translates into relationship with your partner, that opens yet another level of intimacy.
Yeah.
That is so profound, sexually and in non-sexual expressions. And so there's this sense of, as you've so beautifully said it, reclaiming your liberation.
Yeah.
And you get to do it through the incredible and powerful vehicle of your body and your sexuality.
Yeah.
And you're describing it so beautifully, just beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. That was a really big turning point for me when I think I had like a jade egg inside of my vagina, and I was like lying there and I was like, oh, there's still so much pain and so much heaviness. And I was like, what if there what if this is the point? Like, you lying here, touching your own vulva, feeling all of this pain and heaviness, like, the point wasn't to get to some imagined outcome. The point is to be in this process and to feel everything along the way. And that was really like there's nothing wrong with where I'm at right now. And I don't even know where I'll end up. I just love the fact that something inside of me is willing to show up for the journey, whatever it is.
There you go. And that is where liberation takes place. Yes, yes, yes. Wonderfully said, Layla. Is there anything that you wished we'd talked about today that we didn't, that you want to make sure the women know?
Just that we talked about a lot of big concepts quickly. And that there's no reason to know, or nor should you need to know exactly how to get there, that there is, exactly as you're saying, like step-by-step processes, and just the intention of the conversation with you. And one of the things I really wanted to communicate was just like what is possible, because I think that can give a lot of hope, but not to give too many shoulds, that there is just this, like, exactly as you're saying, step by step, and there's a way to get to each step, but you can only go, I used to say, you can only go as fast as like the most traumatized part of you, or the part of you that feels the least safe. And so, like, really working with deep compassion with that part of you, but that it is also possible to experience, with the right tools, with the right support, with the right mindset, like rapid and slow evolution along this path. Like, more is possible than we often think sometimes, and that there can be something so beautiful in that, discovering the magic of your body, or that the wonderful realm of the beauty of your pussy, right? Like that sometimes there is also this sense of like, wow, I didn't know that it could happen as quickly as it did. And it's still such a long-term process to like fully integrate and get all the way there. So I think that's really important to communicate as well. And that there are ways to get to all of these places that we've talked about. It's just, like many of you are doing here, showing up to get more information, showing up to listen to your own inner guidance, finding next steps, things like that.
And being willing and open to reclaim it for yourself. Yeah. That willingness is such a huge, huge part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
You've talked about breath work as a way to help us become present. And that's your gift as well as a breath work exercise. Would you talk about that, please?
Yes, I have a gentle healing breath work that you can download. It's a gift to you. I think it's about a 10-minute practice, and it guides you through all the steps of feeling safe inside of your body, feeling safe inside of your nervous system. And then it puts a lot of what we've talked today into practice, gently opening up your system, shifting out of the judgments, out of the cortical control, and into being with different parts of you, but in a really safe, really gentle way. And in a way where you can actually experience more integration, more wholeness, and a restoration of pleasure. So it kind of puts a lot of what we've talked about into this 10-minute process, I think, and allows you to actually experience it for yourself. So like when you hear a lot of this philosophically, which is usually the first step, it still like doesn't really become clear until you try it out in your own body. So it's this great practice that will let you both try it out in your own body. And then also it's something that you can do regularly, because I found, as important as it is to have guidance on the way, to have, a weekly session with someone who really knows how to support you, especially when you're going through the really hard times. At the end of the day, like, you're the one who's with yourself. The rest of the, like, I don't even know how many hours there are in a week, but like the other 23 hours of a day, So it's so valuable to start to learn to really be with your nervous system and to be with it in a way that feels like empowered and pro pleasure. That's the thing too, to really be an advocate for your body's own pleasure. Like, I really love us going in and being like I like to see like each of us learning to like a little corner of pleasure, just like a tiny little sensation, and just going in and being like, yes, yes, yes,
That's an excellent way to describe it, because those build, right? In the moment, in and of itself, it is precious in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's what's most important. And they build over time.
Yes.
Because you're creating a new neural pathway.
Yes.
To pleasure.
To pleasure.
Yes. Oh, Layla, I can't thank you enough for this time today and for sharing so deeply and so authentically with our women. Just love you and deeply grateful. And love all the women who are here viewing and taking in insights and information. You are inspiring because you've chosen to be on this path. And we know that as every woman heals, it's shifting consciousness on this planet. Someday our daughters and granddaughters and great-great-granddaughters are going to have a very different relationship to sexuality. Yes, because of you. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you in the next interview.